Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic and let's start a new fanfic. Tsunade was at her wit's end. The village hidden in the leaves was peaceful, for now. It has been 2 years since the Fourth Great Ninja War, and they came out of it victorious. Since then Konoha's people have seen peace, but it was peace inside of a glass house. Sasuke Uchiha's actions during the summit meeting of the cages was not forgiven after the war. Yes, they celebrated and cheered for their savoir Naruto, but once the feasts and dances were done. Konoha was far from all right. The numerous head villages around the continent refused to lend any more military support or aid of any kind, so long as Sasuke remained unpunished. Naruto had saved not only the village but practically the entire world. So of course she had the right to ask anything of the cages. Her reward though, left many of the other villages furious. Sasuke Uchiha was to be given a full pardon for his crimes. Damn it Naruto, stupid kid. Tsunade cursed, under her breath. She sighed and got back to her paperwork. She remembered how the other cages, diplomats and Jonin yelled and cursed at Naruto's choice. There was nothing they could do though. The feudal lords themselves had allowed her 2 wishes, if they were within their power to give. A pardon was definitely among them. Tsunade had tried to persuade Naruto the night before, not to ask for such a thing. She didn't listen of course. Now all but one of the major villages were refusing to associate with them, the cages pissed that Sasuke was just walking around a free man. Tsunade knew that Konoha was easy pickings, now that so many alliances were cut and done. If she could just get one more of the cages on their side, she could rest easier at night. One of them could try anything at any moment, an attack could commence today and they'd be crushed. Naruto was the strongest ninja in the world, but now she was pregnant. A pregnant woman was no ninja, and once word got out that Naruto was not only carrying the child of a criminal but also incapable of fighting, it wasn't going to be good. Tsunade thought long and hard about what to do, but she was stumped. Then she remembered something. That was it. Why hadn't she thought of it earlier? Marriage, that was how you formed quick and long-lasting alliances. The only questions were what village would need a good marriage and who to pick. She pondered which village to propose this to for a while. She figured it out though, Kumogakure. The Cloud Village's leader, he was never married and, if rumors were to be believed, he was looking to wed as of late. Tsunade needed to act fast. A letter, where were her damn envelopes? She wrote and sent a letter, addressed to the Raikage directly. Tsunade prayed that he agreed to a union through marriage. This might be the only way to protect Konoha from any future attacks. It took a few days but a messenger arrived with a scroll. Tsunade smiled, it was written by the Raikage himself. Tsunade read the letter. She looked at it again, making sure she hadn't read it wrong. She hadn't, and now she felt a headache starting. Ah, this is just great. Tsunade exclaimed, clearly pissed. The 4th Raikage, named had chosen his bride already. Tsunade should have realized he'd pick her of all people. Still, it changed nothing. The village needed this alliance to be formed. Tsunade called one of her Anbu operatives. He arrived in an instant ready for her command. Bring Hinata Hyuga here, at once, she ordered. Hinata Hyuga, the former heiress to the Hyuga clan, was curious as to why she was called here. She fidgeted as she waited for Tsunade to call her in. Oh, what could I have done? Hinata asked herself. She was sure she hadn't done surging wrong, right? Oh no. Did Lady Tsunade find out about last week? I didn't mean to leave Ichiraku without paying. I was in a hurry and I came back the next day. Hinata said in her mind. She made a small, eep, noise when Tsunade yelled for her to come inside. At once, Lady Hokage. Tsunade was in her chair staring directly at Hinata, a look of frustration on her face. She wasted no time in telling Hinata why she was here. To say the young Hyuga was shocked would be an understatement. Why you must be joking Lady Tsunade. This is a joke right? Hinata looked around to see if there were any hidden cameras. There weren't. Tsunade told her that she was to pack her bags, say her goodbyes and head to the Cloud Village post-haste. Am I not even given a choice? Hinata said, hoping she could simply refuse. Tsunade sighed. She knew this wasn't going to go over well with Hinata. No, you didn't actually have a choice. Tsunade said bluntly. This marriage is much more important than your personal feelings. I'm sorry, Hinata, but we'll drag you there by force if we have to. Tsunade explained. She saw Hinata's body shake, her nerves getting the better of her. She was asked what Hiyashi Hyuga thought of this, if he was against this. You are 18, Hinata, a woman, so your father's approval wasn't needed. Tsunade explained. Hinata was beyond despair now. She hoped this was all some dream, but it wasn't. This was happening and she had no way out of this. She wiped away the tears from her eyes, stood up straight and stared at the Hokage directly in the eyes. Very well. Forcing me won't be necessary. I'll do what's best for the village. Hinata said the last bit with less bravado, her head hanging a bit low once again. Hinata heard Tsunade thank her for not making a big scene out of this. She was dismissed now, so Hinata walked back to her home, slowly. She was practically dragging her feet when she reached the Hyuga estate. Taking a moment to look around her soon-to-be former home, she smiled at all the memories she had here. They all weren't good, but she appreciated them nonetheless. Hinata went to her room to pack and made sure to take in her room for the last time, before her departure. Her father said very little to her before she left, whereas her sister was open about how she was sad to see her go. She assured Hanabi that they're not being separated forever, she'd visit. She went around the village, both explaining the situation and saying her goodbyes to her friends. Naruto was furious, but there was nothing she could do. Now Hinata was at the gate of the village walls while her escort was barely arriving. Tsunade met her here as well, giving her a few warning about the wreckage before she left. Hinata took a deep breath and began her journey to Kumogakure. Off to my new life. Hinata said, trying to remain positive and upbeat. The journey was longer than it might have needed to be, but Hinata insisted on stopping to see the few villages they came across along the way. Over the course of their trek, Hinata was trying to imagine what kind of husband A would be. Strong. Without a doubt. Kind. She hoped. Funny. She figured humor wasn't something most Kage excelled at. Hinata was cheering up as she kept imagining how the wreckage might be a good husband. It was a bit of a long shot though, since Hinata knew the wreckage sought after the Byakugan for years. This was clearly more about obtaining power than it was about the wreckage wanting a real relationship. She sighed sadly and continued her walk towards Kumo. It took a week, but here she was. Hinata looked up at the huge gate. Kumogakure, my new home. Hinata said with a bit of sadness in her voice. She shook one head and smacked her cheeks lightly. No, this is for your people, so it's a good thing. Hinata assured herself. She walked through the gates with her head held high, ready to welcome her new home with open arms. She wasn't very surprised to find the wreckage already there, waiting to greet her. He approached her with a smirk on his face. Hinata Hyuga, I'm happy to see you here at last. Told his soon-to-be bride. She was finally here and wasted no time in seeing what she was working with. What the hell did they feed this girl? Reikage asked himself. He looked her up and down, liking what he saw. Hinata was drop-dead gorgeous. She had flawless porcelain-like skin. To say she had a pretty face was an understatement. Her dark blue hair looked so well kept. Like silk. I was very pleased to see that the food she ate went to all the right places. The young Hyuga sported an hourglass figure, a pair of absolutely massive tits that rivaled Tsunade's, and all this was complemented by ant that you could bounce a coin off of. The Reikage couldn't help but smile at his good fortune. He offered her a handshake and she accepted. Welcome to the Cloud Village. He roared with excitement. Hinata was definitely intimidated by the sheer stature of the man before her. He wore his Kage's coat but no shirt, so his muscular torso was clear to see. He stood a whole foot taller than her. She'd seen a back during the ninja war, but being this close to him was certainly something else. She bowed. I thank you for greeting me here, Rakage. She said truthfully. He laughed loudly, confusing her a bit. Ha ha. No need for that, young lady. We are here to get married, so call me A. He told Hinata. Hinata cleared her throat. Of course, A. I thank you for having me here. She said. Come, let me take you to the Rakage mansion. I'm sure you're tired. Rakage said. Thank you, Hinata said before following her soon-to-be husband. She was brought to the mansion and was amazed at how the decor differed from Konoha's cage mansion. The Rakage had set up a small feast in preparation for their arrival. He figured they might be hungry from the journey, and he was right. Thank you, most kind of you. She spoke. She sat across from the Rakage and thanked the lords for the food before eating. She ate with the grace and manners of a Hyuga, a simple task for a lady such as herself. A was still in disbelief that after all these years of lusting after the Byakugan's power, he was given one on a silver platter. How ironic too, that the same girl he'd attempted to kidnap would be his new bride. There was no need for such drastic measures such as kidnapping or experimentation now. The bloodline of his family and the future Ryokage will have Hyuga blood within them. A thought with a smirk. Hinata asked him when the wedding would be. He chuckled. In 2 days, Lady Tsunade and I both agree that this union should be made official sooner than later. He explained. Hinata was nervous now. The wedding was so soon and she'd only just arrived. She was willing to do what was necessary for the village. But the duties of a wife were things she'd never even come close to doing. She's only ever ed a boy before, for heaven's sake. She wasn't feeling well anymore, so she excused herself for the night. The next morning she felt a bit better. The room was cozy and the bed was soft. She was able to get a good night's rest. She was informed that A was going to show her around the village, so she bathed and dressed for the occasion. She arrived at the front doors to the mansion and greeted A. Good morning, A. How are you this morning? She said with a slight bow. A was happy to see her jiggle as she lowered her body for a bow. Those really are some fantastic tits. A thought. He inhaled before replying back. I'm fantastic this morning, Hinata. Now let's get to sightseeing. He roared with clear excitement in his voice. He guided Hinata Hyuga around the village, showing her the many differences between her here and her previous home. She was visibly awestruck by the many different types of food being made, some she'd never even heard of. She was happy to go into a clothing store and see the various outfits it had to offer. She tried a few on and A was willing to get her plenty of them, but she settled on a single outfit. Not a very materialistic woman, I see. A thought. A few more stops later and it was getting to be around lunchtime, so they headed back to the mansion. Hinata had such an fun morning. Thank you, A, for the lovely time. She thanked the older man. She giggled. I'd never seen so many new dishes before. She admitted happily. A laughed. I'm glad to see Kumo is to your liking, Hinata. He said. I was pleased to see that the village was to her liking, but now it was time to head back. We should hurry back, the food will get cold. He told her. Hinata was practically skipping back to the mansion and was enjoying every second of it. She may wear more loose or baggy clothing, but they did little to hide her curves. Her shook with each little jaunt in her step, and those were definitely moving as well. The honeymoon couldn't come any sooner for the Rakage. Hinata and A ate their lunch, talked for a few hours, and pretty soon it was getting dark. They had a big day tomorrow, so she had to get her rest. A offered to walk her to her room. She accepted and then they were off. Thanks for walking me to the room, A. Hinata said. She was getting used to being on a first-name basis. No need for thanks, we'll be with soon, SND. I need to assure your safety. A said. She was becoming less nervous about the marriage now. It was happening regardless, and Hinata was just happy that it was proving to be a good man. She was worried he'd be some vicious brute. I'm sure our wedding will be a grand one, I look forward to it. She said truthfully. I gave Hanadish a hard smack. He chuckled, as do I. He said before heading back to his own room. Hinata was stunned for a minute or two. She certainly wasn't expecting him to do such a vulgar thing. She went into her room, a blush evident on her. Had a bit of trouble going to sleep, the wedding was tomorrow after all. Hinata managed to get a decent amount of sleep and she was now awake, bathing before the start of her big day. She was drying herself off when she heard a knock at her door. Who is it? It is I, Samui, Hinata Hyuga. Hinata recognized Samui's voice. I'm just getting dressed, so I'll be just a moment. Hinata said. She finished getting dressed, stood at the door and breathed in and out. She was going to get married tonight. Here we go. Hinata whispered, before opening the door. She walked with Samui, ready to start her preparations for her wedding. She got her kimono fitted, her hair was done to perfection, and a few more menial tasks later, she was done. She was walked down the aisle by Samui, not exactly the way she pictured her big day going, but this was meant to be done quickly. The vows were said and the was done, so now the celebration commenced. The group of Kumo citizens and ninja were having a hell of a time. Drinks being downed at record pace, dancing and singing everywhere she looked. The whole place was very lively, so lively in fact that even Hinata herself was enjoying the festivities. Hinata and A talked for a bit, mostly small talk, but the conversation did turn to talks about their honeymoon. Hinata blushed at that topic coming up. She wasn't naive about what would be happening tonight, but she just never thought it'd be with a man over twice her age. She could tell from the Raikage's tone and smirking that he was certainly looking forward to tonight. The ceremony eventually came to an end and now Hinata was inside of A's room, or now hers and A's room. He wasted no time in beginning the consummation of their union. A had his newlywed wife in her back while he was on top of her, exploring her precious mouth with his own. Hinata was scared, this was moving too fast. She managed to get his lips away from hers. Slow down. Please, she begged. A refused to stop. He finally had Hinata Hyuga and he was going to get the most out of her now. Not only did he have access to the Byakugan, but this luscious body belonged to him. He laughed loudly. Sorry Hinata, we need to seal the deal as soon as possible. Exclaimed. He decided it with disrobing her and simply grabbed her kimono and ripped it to shred with his hands. A's mouth was watering as he saw those enormous mammaries bounce free. Oh hell yeah, he yelled. Hinata screamed as she became completely bare for it to see. No. Hinata screamed in disbelief at the situation she was in. This wasn't how a wedding night was supposed to be. A was too busy enjoying these great to stop or slow down even. He took one of her nipples in his mouth and sucked on it like a newborn would for milk. Her skin tasted like heaven and so he decided to run his tongue all around Hinata's huge. He shook his head between her tits before deciding to remove his own kimono. His was eager for some action. Hinata was stunned at the sight of A. Oh God, Hinata said under her breath. A was nothing but a mass of rippling dark muscles in human form. He was a black Adonis. Hinata would be lying if she said she wasn't attracted. Her eyes trailed from his pecs, to his abs and finally to his groin. Hinata felt a string in her own loins as she looked upon A's massive member. It was absolutely huge. A massive 13 inches if she had to guess, with a girth that wouldn't even allow her whole hand to wrap around it. Big, was all Hinata had to say. The Raikage was pleased to see his wife was enjoying the view. Big is an understatement, little lady. He chuckled. Now, let's see what those titties can do. He said with a grin. Hinata didn't fight his as he positioned his between her and pumped away. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. A said with a groan. Her tits wrapped around his big black nicely. Hinata had never done anything close to this before. A tit is what they called it, she was pretty sure. A's was hot and hard, her sensitive had trouble taking the heat of a man's blood-filled member. Is this really that good? She asked. He didn't respond verbally but it did pick up his speed. I was tempted to come all over these wonderful tits, They certainly deserved a good drenching of cum, but he wanted to save his seed for the main event. He removed his from the Hyuga's tit and his twitched, it wanted more. Time for the main course. Told his wife, as he kicked his lips. Hinata's eyes grew wide. No. She knew what it meant and she wasn't sure she was ready. Then she thought back to her village. It needed this union to work. She was the village's last hope. She willingly spread her legs so he could see she was more than ready to do her duty. Hinata saw her husband grin at the sight of her willingly giving her virginity to him. Go slow, she told him. I was happy to see Hinata finally give in, but gentleness wasn't his strong suit, so he lined up his and plunged in. He broke through her hymen and reached her womb's entrance in on single thrust. Damn, that felt good, he said loudly. It's been a while since I had a virgin in his bed. Hinata was shaking with her mouth wide open and her tongue in the air. Hardly able to breathe, she made a handful of incoherent noises. She was in pain, her maidenhood gone just like that. Aha. Hinata wasn't able to finish her words as the Kumo leader started pumping in and out of her. I was in bliss. I have to hand it to you, Hinata, this is one of a kind. He complimented. Her inner flesh was tight, damn near cramped. His was clearly too big for a virgin cunt, but that'd be fixed as soon as he broke it in a little. He gripped the headboard and kept thrusting hard into his newlywed wife. He slammed at the entrance to her womb with each thrust. Yeah, A yelled. Missionary wasn't his favorite position. Hinata needed a little more time to get used to him, though, before he got creative. Hinata was gripping the bed sheets and shaking her head back and forth. Oh, too much. So much. Hinata struggled to get out those words. The thick veiny was stretching out her vaginal walls and Hinata wasn't sure how much more she could take. She felt something building up in her nether regions. Gonna cum, she yelled. A hissed in pleasure as Hinata's clamped down on his while it released its juices. She may have come, but the fourth rakage wasn't stopping. He still needed to breed his wife. Hinata's mind and body were going crazy. She just orgasmed, but her partner gave no signs of stopping his ravaging of her body. She was being used like a toy, a breeding tool, but she wasn't upset. The pain she was feeling wasn't pain anymore. This is starting to feel good, really good. Hinata thought. She was so nervous about this from the get-go and she was in so much pain a few moments ago, yet now she was enjoying having with A. She'd used her fingers before and it did the job, but she'd never came like that before. Husband. That felt so good. Hinata admitted. I knew it was just a matter of time. Hinata was his now, she'd finally given in. Glad you enjoyed that, dear. Not fair if just you cum, though. Said. He picked up his pace and ed her harder and faster than he was before. He went on pounding her for a few more minutes before he felt his own climax coming. He gave one last hard thrust and nutted in her while he was balls deep. Take it all, Hinata. He yelled. Hinata had a smile on her face as she felt ropes of thick and potent spunk fill her womb. She was breathing ragged while she laid down on the bed, completely spent. That was the best thing ever. She admitted with no hesitation or shame. She never in 1,000 years thought she'd become grateful for having been forced to marry the fourth rakage. Hinata laughed a little at how things turned out. Now we can rest, husband. She said. Her eyes opened wide when she heard a laughing. You think just once is enough for me? Hinata yelped when a flipped her over all of a sudden. What the you must be joking. Hinata yelled. Now she was on the bed with her face down, her up and the rakage looming over her. Hinata smiled up at him. This is gonna be a long night, huh? She asked. Damn right, I replied. Hinata felt him plunge once more into her right love tunnel. Yes, more, she screamed. Her dark-skinned husband was violating her and she was loving it. His thick flesh stick was becoming even harder. She didn't even know that was possible. Me, your wife. She begged. He obliged her and now she was biting the bed sheets and moaning. Was all she could think of now. Was grunting as he slammed into his wife's cunt. This was definitely one of his favorite positions. He loved watching Hinata's plump and pale ripple when his black skin smacked into it. He gripped that glorious of hers and plowed her harder now. He loved this body and he was loving Hinata. Tell me, Hyuga, who do you love? You. Hinata relied. I love you, she said loudly. I love you too, he said. It was the truth, he definitely fell hard for her the moment she arrived here. He chuckled. He had another question to ask. Do you like my black? Hinata was in cloud 9 but still managed to answer. Yes. I love your. She replied. My big black. Say it, he demanded. I love your big black COOOCK. Hinata screamed to the heavens. She screamed even more as gripped her hair, pulled her head back and went it to town on her young body. Hinata could feel his black twitch when she admitted how she loved his. Her young cunt was being filled by so many inches of dark man meat and she couldn't wait to feel another load of his jizz inside her. She could hear his breathing become ragged just as hers did, as well. Come in me, eh? Knock me up, Hinata yelled. She came soon after saying that and a must-have as well, because he slammed into her backside. His broke through into her womb and Hinata's orgasm helped milk all of his baby batter into her. She was tired once again but her husband was still hard. The night was still young and the newlywed couple's night of baby making was far from over. Around 6 months later, the Raikage mansion was quiet during the night. The residents all sleeping soundly. Well, aside from a certain couple. The Raikage was standing up in his room, and groaning in pleasure. His beautiful wife, Hinata, was busy bobbing her head back and forth with his in her mouth. She'd gotten much better at blowjobs this last month. She had plenty of practice now that she was farther along her pregnancy. The doctor had told them that was dangerous for the baby at the moment so had no choice but to settle for a bit of oral care from his wife. You really are getting better, Hinata. He complimented. Hinata stopped sucking so she could respond. Thank you, my love, anything to please you. She said. Thank the Lord that Samui gave me some tips. Hinata thought. She went back to sucking on the dark meat in front of her. She may not have seen her life playing out like this, but she was happy nonetheless. On a quiet night, Hinata was enjoying a quiet meal with some of her friends. They had just cleaned up their food and were enjoying some drinks when Sakura said something that caught Hinata and the other girls' attentions. It's still so strange that the war is over. I remember nights where it was so hard not to give in to fear. Sakura said with a soft smile. I do not miss it. Hinata declared as she slowly raised up her glass to enjoy some tea. Yes, I remember many days where everything felt so grim. Tenten said slowly. I know what you mean. Luckily, I figured a way to counter that. Sakura said with a sharp smile. She leaned in a bit closer to her blonde friend Ino. I would bet a new guard each evening. A man near to battle for hours is always a beast in bed. Really? I thought I was the only one. Ino smiled at her friend. And we weren't the only ones. Sakura declared, her green eyes slowly towards her black-haired friend. Suddenly both Ino and Tenten also looked towards Hinata. Wait, what do you mean, Hinata? Ino said as she looked at her friend for an answer. Ooh, Hinata said, her eyes avoiding her friend's gaze as she debating raising her glass for another drink. She and I had a little thing during the war. They made a pledge to be together. I thought it was very cute. The fourth Raikage and young quiet Hinata, together as a couple. Sakura said, leaning back in her chair slightly. It was just because, never mind. Hinata said, she herself had never expected to talk about such things, even with her friends. So did you ever, you know? Tenten investigated, hoping for more information about her new knowledge. I will not say a word. Hinata said sharply, even though her voice was still nearly quiet as a whisper. That means she did it with a for sure. Sakura said, a wild smile forming on her lips before she enjoyed more of her tea. HMMMPH. It is the past. I prefer to focus on moving forward. Hinata declared, an edge on her voice informing Sakura that she did not care for such talk. Her pink-haired friend simply smiled before raising her glass before Ino changed topics. That night, after Hinata left her friends, she was just about to walk into her home when she noticed signs of construction on a house nearby. It appeared that the house was being remodeled in a different style. She didn't think of it any more that evening, but in the morning, she started noticing little details, designs and motifs that felt familiar. A week later, when she saw the house was finally done being rebuilt, she saw the man who had claimed the house. Her feet suddenly walked no further when she spotted the fourth wreckage. Her heart paused for a moment as she just stood there, cradling her youngest child as she saw the older but still quite imposing wreckage walking into what was apparently his house while two attendants followed him with some belongings. Another week passed before she saw the wreckage, two more before they even greeting one another. Hinata had not seen Naruto for 2 days thanks to his Hokage duties, and she came upon the wreckage while she was returning home. Hinata, san, you look as beautiful as ever. I must bring these supplies home. Of course, the wife of a Hokage must have much to do. I hope your husband knows how rare a jewel you are, Hinata. Farewell. Said simply enough before he moved past her and continued out along his path. A few days passed, more time where she hardly saw her husband. She knew the importance of his duties, but it did not help her lonely nights. After one evening she arose from her bed, troubled by a dream of her time during the Fourth Shinobi World War. She rested there in her evening clothing, thinking of how she had made an agreement with the wreckage when Naruto had not answered her confession. It had been a time of war with a simple enough agreement to be together. She ended it after the war was over and ended up marrying Naruto. But somehow I cannot keep him from my thoughts. Hinata thought angrily before she looked out a window towards the newly constructed house. She looked back towards her empty bed and then tried to quiet her mind with some books concerning the mystical palm techniques and others. She fell asleep looking for a technique that would help clean her mind of troubling thoughts. Unfortunately, in the morning they were still waiting for the young woman with sharp black hair. A few days later, Hinata found herself being admitted into the inner sanctum of A's house. She had left her children in the care of Ino, telling her friend that she wanted to spend the day training. The skilled shinobi headed out into the wounds and then quickly snuck back into town to arrive at the wreckage's house. Soon enough, she stood before A. While he looked a bit different from their time during the war, he still exuded strength and power, despite his age. Hinata-san, what is it? I asked her while he rested nearly motionless on the largest chair in the chamber. For several moments Hinata said nothing, she just stood there, in the room in the house of a man who was not her husband. Part of her wanted to move her foot back, just a bit. The area of her mind knew if she could just move an inch, she would leave the place and never have such thoughts again. Alas, that was not the part of Hinata who emerged victorious. I have never forgotten about you, A. I want to feel your big strong inside of me again. Hinata's soft purple eyes widened and simply blinked as her mind processed the words that had just come from her lips. She stood in front of him, her breathing slightly erratic after making her confession. How can I have said that? I love Naruto-kun. I am so bad. Before her usual sense managed to take over. Very well, Hinata. A's clear-cut voice rang out in Hinata's ears. He had barely spoken more than 10 words to her, and yet this newest trio sent a slight thrill down her spine. Come, I want to see you. It has been many years since I looked upon my woman without any clothing. A declared, his voice weathered by age but still strong and determined all the same. Her new neighbor and former boyfriend during the war sat in wait for Hinata to comply with his request. After Hinata gulped down her fear and shame, it did not take long. She quickly undid the dark strap, tying her top together, and then pulled her sleeveless top over her head. By the time her s were exposed to A, Hinata could feel her body heat rising with lust. A's sharp eyes watched as she neatly set down her boots and folded her stockings. Her S seemed a bit larger than he remembered, and they only served to heighten his own arousal. Still, he appeared like a statue made of onyx even after Hinata pulled down her dark blue pants and the white underwear hidden beneath. Hinata was embarrassed to be standing in front of the wreckage, but quickly enough she had something very distracting to focus on. A removed his own clothes even quicker than Hinata, and soon enough he stood before her. Being without her husband for too long meant seeing A and his enormous thing was more than enough to warm up the black-haired woman's nether regions. The shinobi's lust and desire curled around her body, and she felt a trickle of her lust leak out from her pink opening. The water of her lust trickled down through the black bristles of her pubic hair. Not bad, I swear, it looks like your S are even larger than when I met you, Hinata. A grunted. A-san has complimented my S. Hinata said, her voice nearly the level of a whisper as her cheeks became flush with an embarrassed red color. She took a step closer to where I was waiting. Such a beautiful young. I hope my body will last against it, heh. A has complimented my. Hinata said right as she realized that she was now standing in front of A. Acting more by reflex than anything else, she suddenly found herself kneeling in front of A's body and reaching out her tongue towards the tip of his strong long. Find authorized novels in webnovel, faster updates, better experience, please click ahref equals, book, Shippuden, stories _18 quadrillion 166 trillion 99 billion 306 million 680,205 Hinata and I _49 quadrillion 161 trillion 219 billion 46 million 698,603 book, Shippuden, stories _18 quadrillion 166 trillion 99 billion 306 million 680,205 Hinata and I _49 quadrillion 161 trillion 219 billion 46 million 698,603 A for visiting. It's so hot, I forgot how it tasted. Hinata whispered out as she continued getting used to the taste of eyes thick with her tongue. She hooked and weaved her pink flesh along A's darker toned. It was a bit bitter and very, very warm. The more that she licked, the more she wanted to enjoy the flavor. She felt her nipples harden as she continued stroking and rubbing her tongue along his flesh. As she continued, Hinata maximized the heat in her now moist if not weeping. Open up your mouth. Your tongue is not enough for my. Any woman of a wreckage would use every part of her body to please him. Quote. Hinata looked up at A and nodded quickly, in part to hide her nervousness. Even though she had done such lewd things before, it wasn't part of her normal routine. But she was eager to please A and make him feel good. If she really could do that with just her mouth alone, she was not about to shirk away from such a challenge. The shinobi with black hair and soft purple eyes relaxed her jaw and opened her mouth nice and wide. Soon Hinata was doing her best to challenge herself and the wreckage's own guesses as to how much she could take of his. With the fierceness she employed against many of her other challenges, Hinata put all of her energy into the process. Her head moved back and forth along A's big juicy. Licking the old man's had been one thing, feeling him fill up her mouth with his was something else entirely. Soon the tip of his was hitting against the back of her throat as she continued suckling his with her throat. Her tongue continued waggling and teasing along every inch of the wreckage's enormous length as Hinata's S occasionally rubbed against the tender flesh of his thick full ballsack. That is enough, Hinata. I must get used to how good you are at sucking. The venerable wreckage declared, even though it was partially to cover up how close he was to erupting. No matter the pleasure of ing the cute young woman's mouth, he was interested in far more. Now turn around for me. When the old man spoke, his voice thundered through the whole house. Hinata was a bit unsure what he had in mind, but she did as he commanded her all the same. Of course, the cute black-haired woman said softly. Moving slowly, she turned her body around. Her flesh was already a bit damp and she could feel sporadic goose bumps on her arms and legs. When the wreckage gripped her in his still powerful hands, she fought to not let out a surprised cry. With strength that belied his years, the man with a blonde beard and skin the color of oak casually lifted up Hinata. Supported by his muscular form, the mighty Raikage lowered her slowly down so that his enormous was only a few centimeters from her wanton. I'm sorry, but I don't think it will fit inside me, Hinata said shyly, almost ashamed that it appeared that she would be unable to take in that her was practically salivating for. I will be the judge of that, Hinata. The Raikage growled out before he stuffed the thick crown of his straight inside of her whimpering cunt. Hinata let out an intense howl of pleasure as the foreign piece of flesh pushed inside of her pink opening. Didn't even stop there and instead pressed his horny rod of hard skin and muscle nearly halfway inside of the black-haired woman's needy. Every inch he penetrated, Hinata made more of her flesh coil. Throw out her inner walls pushed in around A's powerful. It would have been a strain for many men his age, but it was Raikage and his strength persisted thanks to his raw power and training. Hinata's large S quivered as her body did its best to quickly acclimate to his incredible girth. She felt filled out so perfectly by the Raikage's grate, and he wasn't even thrusting all the way inside of her yet. See, I knew that my would fit inside of your naughty. You wouldn't be a very good woman to a Raikage if that was not possible. A's is inside of my. The lovely woman with sharp black hair and soft purple eyes gasped, her aching with need and satisfaction, even though it had not even penetrated her fully. Hinata couldn't believe it. A man who wasn't her husband, who wasn't Naruto-kun, was pushing his inside of her. A's felt different, their husbands, a bit rougher inside of her but incredibly pleasing all the same. As he continued penetrated her weeping, Hinata ended up shifting slightly in the large man's grip to get a bit more comfortable. I can sense your hunger, Hinata, your frustration. A reached out his hands and slapped them down on her nice juicy S and hard pink nipples. Hinata cried out, but her sensual moans did little to dissuade the older man from continuing. The Raikage continued building up his pattern with a new surge of powerful thrust. Light lightning flashing through the sky, his iron-hard members slammed nice and deep into Hinata's warm pink cavern. A-san is so rough. If you're not careful, you're going to pull off my nipple sawa. The beautiful woman moaned out while the Raikage's powerful hips continued to make her entire frame bounce up and down on his powerful shaft. I shouldn't be doing this, but it feels so good. You feels so good inside my. The busty shinobi whimpered out as she squirmed on top of A's huge. No one made you come here but you, Hinata, declared with a growl of his thunderous voice. The incredible tightness and warmth of Hinata's was driving him closer and closer towards a powerful release. All the same, the old warrior did his best not to let on the great strain that came within such an amazing woman. I'm so embarrassed to be posed like this. Hinata couldn't even finish her sentence as she let out another moan while her body was filled with even more warmth and pleasure from A's storming up into her squishy flesh. She knew it was bad, but the bliss and sensation now coursing through her cut off her sentence. Do you want me to stop? I asked, his still pounding away within the silky warm tunnel of Hinata's quivering. Her pupilless purple eyes looked at him and after a moment she shook her head. No, A-kun. I can do whatever he wants to me. But please, do not come inside. Hinata said. While part of her knew she shouldn't have welcomed it into her body, she knew that the worst she could do was let him come inside of her. That would be very alarming. I welcome such an invitation. A growled out before he moved his hands from her sensitive nipples and then gripped her legs tightly. Before Hinata could do anything, she found the Raikage pulling her legs back towards her S and her shoulders. Thanks to her incredible flexibility, Hinata's legs were easily able to be pulled back to where I wanted them. Soon enough, her upraised legs framed Hinata's bouncing breaths and the Raikage quickly started bouncing her on top of his mighty once more. Hinata cried out as her former friend fed his length deeper and deeper into the delicate pink folds of her. It wasn't long before her flesh was starting to warm up. She knew from her times with Naruto that if something or someone continued stimulating her there, right along one of her weakest points, she would start losing herself to her pleasure. As he held her legs in his iron-like grip, Hinata reached her hands around his arms and legs and attempted to pinch her nipples. The young woman with black hair and soft purple eyes pinched and pulled on the pink flesh of her nipples before her mind started to melt over from her orgasm. "Kun, I can't believe it, Huawa, your A's is so thick. It feels like you're going to pull my inside out, Hiawa." Hinata screamed out, her body rushing forward towards her release as A's firm grip constantly pulled her up and down along his incredible throbbing. Hinata's toes curled as frantic jolts of energy poured through her veins. Being ed by A, and in this position was creating such a powerful spell of lust inside of her body and mind that she didn't know what to do. As she came, every new thrust inside her made her reflexes take over. Her body willed her vaginal opening to sharply constrict around A's, and before either of them knew it, the older man was roaring out with pleasure as he started coming nice and deep inside her flesh. Thick. It feels so thick inside of me. You were not supposed to come inside my A. Hinata said softly, her entire body burning and aching. Her senses seemed to return to her and she managed to pull her body off of the rackage and start gathering up her clothes. Hinata's became a vice around my. I am sorry. The rackage are not trained to hold back their releases. It will not happen again, the mighty rackage said as she remained seated in his chair. Hinata barely heard his words. All she could see was his, leaking cum and coated in her juices while his own cum dripped and leaked free from her folds. I'm sorry, but I must go. I must get cleaned up, Hinata said before she took her clothes and quickly fled the room. As A watched her leave, the old man slowly let out a long breath of satisfaction. He was still a bit surprised Hinata had even come into his house that day, and yet something told him that she would return all the same. I left Hinata and Naruto's home. She worked quickly, but not nervously to get cleaned up. Guilt clawed at the back of her mind, but all that she focused on for now was removing the evidence. As she washed her body, her thoughts returned to feeling the rackage's flesh against her own. It felt so hot, so strong, and she let out a soft gasp thinking of how it had felt to feel her filled out by eyes big and powerful. She put a hand to her mouth, not wanting to allow another gasp. Slowly she returned her hands to washing off her body. As the beautiful woman with pupil-less eyes continued cleaning the sweat and stains of both her and I's juices, Hinata's mind wandered back to the first time she had met Raikage I. XXXXXXXX. It had been a time of great war. Unlike any battle that Hinata had experienced before, the war threatened to consume everything that she knew, and everyone close to her. She had battled in an early skirmish, but most days she spent plenty of her downtime helping to heal those who were injured in the early battles. Hinata was a little concerned. The world was at war, but something more personal was on her mind. She had asked Naruto if he loved her wholeheartedly. Much to her grief and embarrassment, Naruto had not given her an answer. After parting from him, Hinata put all of her focus into training and preparing for battle. She trained for hours each day, almost so ruthlessly that she risked injuring herself or the person she was training with. Friends tried to get her to talk, but she rarely spoke more than 10 words to them. The young ninja woman was focused on the battle ahead. She was not rude to her friends, but she would not open up about her pain either. The thing that jarred her from her downtrodden behavior was actually quite unexpected. The great villages had aligned, which meant that not only might they have a chance against their enemy, but that people who normally interacted rarely were now thrust together in the massive camps that housed all the ninjas. One evening, she witnessed the fourth raikage. Hinata was sure that she had not seen anyone quite so powerful as he. In addition to standing a head above the tallest person that she had known, his muscles looked incredible. It looked like they rippled with the same power he was able to wield every time he went through his training motions or sparred with an opponent. At one point their eyes connected. Hinata did nothing. Her breath had been caught in her lungs, and only when the raikage turned his gaze away was she able to regain control of her body once again. One day she found herself actually training with the seasoned fighter who was master of the lightning release technique. They fought fiercely against one another. Hinata got in some strikes, but she was not in the same universe as I was as far as her fighting skills were concerned. As they drank water and cleaned themselves up, she found the resolute face of the fourth Raikage looking intensely at her. One so young and so beautiful as you should not have to experience war, especially one like this. The burly and muscular shinobi said with a sharp and almost forceful tone. Hinata simply looked at him while a short sniff left her nostrils. She was not afraid of the battles to come. I am like everyone else here. I will do my part. That is my duty, the young woman with dark blue hair said dispassionately towards the fourth Raikage. The man with oak-colored skin nodded and then said nothing for a moment. He seemed motionless, like a great weathered tree with bark-like skin and hair the color of sunlight. At one point, Hinata could swear she saw his eyes dip down and look over her sweaty body in her training clothes. What is he looking at? Do I have something on my nose? The young woman thought before suddenly, the muscular mammoth of a man departed the area. He said nothing as he left, and soon enough he was far from her sight. Later on, the two continued training together. I and Hinata would never actually plan to meet up, it just seemed like the two would find each other at the training area. Even when there were other available partners, the two would simply move in unison and end up sparring together. While she had been annoyed at his gaze and at his words about her not belonging on the battlefield, something drew Hinata to the Raikage. He was just so different than just about anyone else she had met before. Training with him felt like one of the first times that she could forget about what had happened between her and Naruto. After one particularly long training session, the two of them were the only ones left at the training session. Once again, after they had finished training, the fourth Raikage looked at her and said the first words he had said during their whole training session. Why are you sad, girl? He asked her with no sense of tact or grace as he loosened the training wraps he had woven around his fists when the two of them had started their training bout of the evening. That is a private matter. Hinata shot back at him, quicker than she had intended. Perhaps for others, but not for you. I can read it off your body as easily as the words on a page. Love is the beast on your back. The older man said before offering a short annoyed grunt. What does a brute like you know about love? Hinata replied sharply. Immediately, she felt quite embarrassed, and slightly worried that he would be mad at her. Fortunately, he seemed as resolute and austere as ever before. I do not know it like you do. But something everyone will tell you is that you need a clear head in battle. Your feelings are a distraction. I spoke with the weight of experience. In battle, there could be nothing less than the goal of defeating your opponent. In war, it was even worse, your opponents could be as many as clouds in the sky. A warrior in a war had to keep surviving until there was none left. There was no room for distraction. I know a way to get rid of them. Come with me. Hinata watched as the fourth Raikage got up from the training mat. She did not rise. Talking about love had made her think of Naruto. She felt helpless to do anything for a minute, even breathing seemed like an enormous task. In a way, she had to admit that Ai's words held some truth. She was distracted. Thank you, Ai-san. But I should rest for the evening. Hinata declared, her voice shaking slightly from her nerves. Keeping Naruto from her mind was hard. Now that his face was in her thoughts, it was much harder to get rid of him. She was distracted, and if battle started tomorrow, she would need to get him clear of her mind. I seemed to sense her struggle. Rest is the weak answer. It will not solve your problem. I know you are uncertain, but once I have shown you this path, you will thank me for my wisdom. The Raikage said and then finally continued walking. This time, Hinata's mind pressed her legs into action. After she rose up, she collected herself and fell in line behind the great warrior. XXXXXXX. You must be for this lesson. The Raikage said after the two were settled inside of his large tent. The ninja girl with cute features looked at him with surprise for a moment. Her surprise grew as he himself undressed, and only then did Hinata heed Ai's commands. Her movements were not rushed, and she took her time removing each piece of clothing under the eyes of the fourth Raikage. Nearly as soon as her outfit was removed from her milk-white flesh and settled down in neatly folded formation, Hinata struggled against reflex to cover up her S and the black bush that was nestled on her. A sense of shame tugged at her for being in front of someone she did not know that well, but at the moment, she was focused on doing as I requested. She felt confident that I was a wise warrior, someone with many more techniques and much more knowledge that she had. As she looked at him and his resolute demeanor, she was confident that he would free her of her distraction and allow her to be ready for the next battle. With that in mind, she was still slightly surprised when the skilled warrior approached her body and reached out his hand to her flesh. Hinata let out a short gasp as Ai's fingers connected with her. His fingers felt like iron tongs wrapped in leather. When he squeezed along the sensitive flesh of her, Hinata wanted to speak, to ask him what he was doing, but the pleasure from his fingers was blinding. Her mind felt muddled and light as he squeezed along every bit of the pillow-like form of her tit. This must be a very powerful technique. Hinata thought to herself before letting out a quiet but passionate moan crept out from her lips. The young ninja's eyes blinked rapidly while her mouth remained open. She couldn't believe that just Ai's hand alone was giving her such sensations. Of course, the technique the Raikage planned to show Hinata employed much more than just his fingers. As Ai's hand remained on Hinata's, his thumb shifted position and started teasing along the pretty pink flesh making up the lovely young woman's nipple. The skin was still damp from her sweat, but as the Might Y warrior played with the sensitive nub, it was only a matter of seconds before Hinata moaned out against while her nipple hardened. Ai's eyes watched as the girl with dark blue hair twitched and then shuddered under his touch. Soon he decided to add even more of his body into the mix. The muscular form that had first caught Hinata's attention suddenly moved in and started rubbing itself against her body. As their bodies rubbed against one another, the Raikage made sure to leave some room so that his hand could continue playing with the girl's tit. As his fingers continued their work, his legs, hips, shoulders and even his awakening rubbed warmly against Hinata's exposed body. The girl with pupil-less eyes and full S was surprised by how she was being touched. It seemed so harmonious and natural, but quite surprising given how I fought and trained. Almost as she finished that thought, I added more fuel to the fire, lighting up the inside of Hinata's core. Without warning, the fourth Raikage leaned his head in close to the girl's shorter frame. His mouth attached itself to the soft smooth flesh of Hinata's shoulder. She was just about to pull him off when his teeth latched onto her flesh. Hinata let out a moan of pain and pleasure. As Ai's teeth dug into her flesh, his fingers had gotten her other nipple hard as a rock while his continued straightening up. Soon, the long spear of flesh and carnal focus was starting to brush and jab against Hinata's body. The tip of his was warmer than any other part of his body, but it didn't leave any trail of precum whenever it connected with the shinobi's flesh. While precum wasn't leaking freely from Ai's tip, the black bristles that formed Hinata's pubic hair were starting to get drenched by the offerings from inside of her. Her body was getting warmer and warmer by the moment. Her mind was now completely focused on the pleasure Ai was unlocking inside of her. The pain from his teeth made her body shiver, but it also seemed to open up more of a door to her greater passions as the warm hard body of the warrior continued sliding and rubbing against her own lithe form. Ai-san, are you sure we should be doing this? The powerful Raikage did not answer her. Instead, Ai suddenly grabbed Hinata and shifted the position of her left leg. The strong muscles in his arm bulged as he pulled up her sweaty limb with one arm while his other hand reached his fingers down to play with her. His thick fingers pressed through the black hairs of the girl's pubic mound. The instant that his fingers brushed against Hinata's labia, it felt like a jolt of explosive energy was snapping all over her flesh. In life, as in battle, you must be assertive, little one. I grunted before he licked his tongue slowly over the marks that he had just made on her flesh. As his tongue cushioned her pain, his fingers continued enjoying themselves all along the slippery smooth texture of her. Hinata gasped again, her mind sinking further into the pool of bubbling lust. A's fingers squeezed on her outer lips before his head leaned down and he bit onto her shoulder with his teeth once again. As teeth squeezed on her sensitive skin, the fiery dance of pleasure and pain burned throughout Hinata's shapely form. The sensations fed her body's hunger, but in a way, the young ninja knew that he was still teasing her, playing with her. Part of her wanted to be free of his strong arms and skilled fingers, but another greater part of her heart and mind wanted to leap even deeper into Ai's grip. More gaps and lewd moans fled from her lips before the fourth Raikage pulled back his fingers and then angled his in for a powerful thrust. Oh ah! The woman with dark blue hair moaned out. Ai's thick crown wedged apart her petals and then pierced deep inside Hinata's precious opening. Her leg ached and twitched in Ai's arm while her two arms encircled Ai's neck and she started humping her body against the rigid form of the man who was ing her. The momentum of her motions helped lodge even more of Ai's throbbing deeper within her vessel. I told you this technique would clear your mind. But you are still holding back. Fully lose yourself to it, Hinata, I declared as Hinata's fingers tensed and tightened on the flesh of his neck while she continued driving her body forward to take as much of his inside of her as possible. The ninja girl was nearly delirious with pleasure by then. Yes, Ai-san. I will try my best. Hinata cried out before her head leaned back and she roared out with even more bliss. The young woman's quivered with delight while the cries of her pleasure were music to the Raikage's ears. The ninja continued screaming while her squeezed and tugged on every inch of the mighty warrior's member. Hinata's pupil-less eyes widened each time more and more pleasure burned inside of her while I felt his diving deeper into her molten warmth. Hinata's body noosed in a forceful, almost brutal fashion against Ai's muscular form. Sweat started forming on both of their bodies as their S raced and pressed against one another. The fourth Raikage's fingers gripped her leg while the other continued squeezing and playing all over her heaving S. Each time Hinata's nipples scrapped against the hard oak-colored flesh of Ai, new bolts of lust penetrated nice and deep into her mind. Ai-san, I can't believe this giant thing fits inside of me. I want you to me more, me like an animal on the ground, Ai-san. Hinata screamed out. It was the first time that she had seen him smile, but finally, she saw a small grin on Ai's face when she made the request. The mighty warrior shifted his arm and then waited for Hinata to take a new position. Hinata quickly turned around and then lowered her and sweaty body down onto the ground. Soon she was on all fours and ready to feel the Raikage inside of her again. The young woman felt a bit nervous. She had never had in a position like this before, but Hinata was excited to feel new sensations as I climbed up on top of her incredible form once more. It wasn't long at all before she felt the solid tip of Ai's spearing inside of her once again. Soon, the wing in her lungs was being pressed out with each new thrust. The young woman's S dipped and raced all over the space in between her body and the ground as I pounded her. Behind her, I started squeezing and slapping on her as his drilled closer and closer to her core. Before long, Hinata was squealing like a bitch in heat as the fourth Raikage continued building up a raging inferno of pleasure inside of her body. Ai-san, come, I'm coming on your big giant awa. Hinata screamed out deliriously as a mountain of pleasure shattered into 1,000 shards of joy and bliss inside of her mind. Her entire body spasmed while her twitched and convulsed along the giant of the man inside of her. As her love juices sprayed out all over the Raikages and pelvis, he never stopped thrusting until he started coming as well. Feel the power of the Raikage. I growled out before his jerked and sent the first of his thick load deep into Hinata. The girl moaned out passionately before she slid forward and collapsed on the ground. Her was completely soaked with her juices and his cum and some of Ai's seed even started pouring out of her well-ed orifice. For a while, Hinata just lay there on the ground, a sweaty, cum-soaked mess with her only desire now being to regain her breathing. When she finally recovered, she saw Raikage I had changed to a meditative pose. Tonight your mind is clear. But tomorrow, I worry the conflict will continue inside you. There is only one answer. Hinata was too tired and worn out to rise up. She simply looked at Ai and barely managed to lean her body up. Her body quivered before she managed to speak. What is the answer? You will be my woman during the war. At night you will be mine and I will make sure your mind is always clear and ready for battle. Do you accept? I said, his fearsome tone having returned from earlier. Hinata was surprised by his words. It was an honor even to be spoken to by the Raikage, and now he wanted her to be with him for the war. She couldn't think of anything else other than the pleasure he had given her. There was only one answer she could give. I accept, Ai-kun. Pushing aside the heavy oak door, she walks into the Hokage's office. Finding her sitting at her desk behind a pile of papers, not bothering to look up as her guest stops just short of reaching her. Tsunade continues working on the various reports, requests, and other papers scattered around, forcing her to stand there awkwardly while she waits to learn why she was summoned. After several minutes of tense silence, Tsunade looks up at her visitor, resignation written on her features. Hinata, I have a mission for you. Of course, Hokage. I'll get it done. I know. That's part of the problem. The Raikage is coming to the village to discuss the continued peace. You will be his escort for the entirety of his stay. You will see to his needs and follow his orders. And you will provide whatever he desires during his stay. No exceptions. Am I clear? Yes, Hokage. But nothing. You have your orders. He will arrive tomorrow at 10 a.m. We have arranged lodging already. Shizune can give you the details. Meet him at the entrance and do your job. Dismissed. Yes, Hokage. She bows and turns to exit the room, but Tsunade had already returned to her paperwork. Poor girl. I hope she is ready for this. And that she doesn't hold it against me. At 9:50 the next morning, Hinata is standing outside the massive gates leading to the village. She is taking shelter of the shade provided by the great trees lining the path in an attempt to escape the freak heat wave that is hitting the village. She was starting to regret not wearing her regular clothes. The light purple and white of her normal outfit would undoubtedly have been better suited to the unbearable heat. But in the interest of solidarity, she chose to wear the uniform of the Allied shinobi forces. A uniform worn by the entire world as they put aside all differences and struggles of rival nations to come together for the betterment and protection of all. What better way to greet the leader of Konoha's largest rival for the peace talks? Or so she had thought. Now as sweat gathers on her brow and her heavy dark blue outfit sticks to her skin, she is regretting her decision. Relief washes over her as the Raikage come into view, wearing nothing but his usual open shirt and pants with golden belt and wrist adornment. Showing off his impressive abs, Hinata often thought he was vain for always having them out in the open, but now found herself envying him and his clothing choice. He was flanked by his entourage of shinobi, meant to ensure his protection and act as his bodyguards. She recognized them, but only in passing. The dark-skinned redhead had once beaten Naruto into the ground. And she had heard many comments of the busty blonde by some of the more perverted members of her village. The same comments that have often been said about her once she started developing her womanly figure. Leaving her shelter in the shade as she marches to meet the group. Bowing in respect as she reaches them. She can feel her large S hanging down as the vest she is wearing fails to keep them contained. She is certain that they are all staring at them but refuses to look. Heat rises in her cheeks as she feels the stares. She knows they are looking at her S. Now more than ever she hates the fact that she was so well endowed. Rise, Hyuga. She does as told and for the first time comes face to face with the Raikage. Or more accurately face to chest, as he is well over a foot taller than her, and she finds herself staring directly at the hardened muscle revealed by his open shirt. Looking up, she sees the same thing she has often seen when men look at her, and it fills her with trepidation. Lust. The Raikage wants her, and she will have to be with him almost entirely for the next week. Tsunade-sama, why couldn't you have picked someone else? Samui, Karui, Darui. See, you're all on leave until further notice. Consider this a paid vacation. Do what you will. They looked as surprised as Hinata felt at the order. They seemed about to object when the blonde simply walked off with a half wave over her shoulder and a, "You're the boss." The rest following suit as she was left there alone with the rakeage. The lust in his eyes not gone but mixed with something she could not identify. That should have brought her comfort, but with his guards gone it was now just her with a man more powerful than her in every conceivable way and who she was ordered to obey and see to his every need. She prayed that she was wrong about him. "I trust quarters have been arranged for me." Hinata nearly jumps out of her skin as she is jolted out of her thoughts by the very man who made her so anxious. "Yes, Lord Rakeage. If you would follow me I will show you to your rooms." Turning on her heel she starts walking, not looking to see if he is following. And hoping that she is imagining that she can feel his eyes on her large jiggling rear. For what feels like the 50th time that day Hinata is cursing her own genes and body. A body that seemed to try and spite her at every turn. She spends her life trying to avoid attention and the gazes of others only for her to develop the largest pair of S in the village, their only rival is those of Tsunade's legendary pair. She increases her training in hopes of burning away and losing the unwanted fat and somehow ends up with a large butt that she can feel jiggling with every step. She cracks down on her diet and even starts joining Lee on his workouts in an attempt to turn her misfortune around. And she does develop a lot of muscle and stamina, it just isn't visible underneath the layer of plush covering her body. That's not to say that she was fat because that couldn't be further from the truth. She simply had some additional curves that none of the other girls her age had. Especially now. After escorting the rakeage to his quarters she had spent the next several hours in his presence as he refreshed and cleaned himself. Which of course led to him walking around in even less than he normally wore. And once she was almost flashed as he walked out of the bathroom completely after a shower. The rest of the day was spent in meetings between the two cages. She stood there silently ignoring the stares her charge sent her way at every opportunity. After hours of willfully ignoring the lust of the cage she escorted him to his chambers where she had hoped to leave him, she could protect him from outside just as well. Alas she wasn't so lucky. The rakeage had decided to shower again to wash off the sweat the heat had caused and had asked for her to get him dinner but all restaurants were closed at this hour so she was forced to cook it herself. Which is how she found herself cooking for a man who had been undressing her with his eyes all day as she felt herself jiggling with every movement while her was in the next room. She had been resisting the urge to remove any more clothes. While she would ease the heat she would also give the lecherous man more of a view and that was the last thing she wanted to do. She hears the bedroom door open behind her but stops herself from looking, focusing on plating the cooked food and leaving. She gathers the cooked food and carries it to the table, cautious when she sees that A is not at the table. Still she has a job. Placing the food down she is about to go look for him when a hand delivers a painful smack on her voluptuous rear. Staying there and kneading the flesh as if testing it for quality. "Look what you did. Ruined my meal." "That's fine. But I'm still hungry." Chasing after her he wraps a hand around her throat as the other reaches up and grabs A. "Your people killed one of mine some years ago. Accused him of trying to kidnap you, actually. Did you know that? Your uncle died to appease my village. But I'm not satisfied." He releases her as she falls to her knees, gasping for air and ignoring the tingling she felt at his touch. As she gasps for air Hinata falls forward onto her hands and knees. Stopping mid-heave as her head hits something. Her heaves stop dead as she freezes. Not able to breathe she steels herself as she tilts her head up, looking at what had just touched her. And as she feared the thing that meets her gaze is a massive piece of flesh dangling beneath like a third leg. Not even hard and almost reaching his knees is dangling right in front of her face, close enough that she can feel the heat radiating off of it. If she were to stick her tongue out she could touch it. She stays like that for several moments, too stunned to do anything. The pain in her lungs remind her that she hasn't breathed in several moments and she takes a deep breath, inhaling the musky scent the large organ gave off, feeling a tingling sensation between her thighs as she does so. It's that feeling that shocks her into action. Her immediate response is to pull away and tries to do so, but A is already planning on it. A strong hand in her hair not only keeps her from pulling away but pulls her forward, forcing her face to rub against the that easily covers most of it and inhale even more of its musk. Lord Rakeage. Please. This is. I can't. Haven't. Ah. The massive pillar had been twitching against her as her breath washed over it. Feeling the rod slowly hardening against her was doing things she refused to acknowledge. And was given the chance to, as she was effectively silenced by a massive palm reaching over and smacking her large butt. She winces as she feels the flesh continuing to shake several moments later. Listen here. You are to see to my wants. I want to feel your mouth around my. Now get to it. Consider it payback for the trouble you caused. Now, suck. Seeing no way out and hoping only for a quick end to this horrible situation, she tentatively sticks her tongue out. Recoiling as much as she can after touching it, not at the taste but the knowledge of what she had just done. A was having none of that. Pulling back on her hair, he thrusts his head into her open mouth, stopping the gasp before it can escape. Take off your shirt. Show me those massive udders. Her jaw straining around the girth as the head rests on her tongue, she rushes to comply. Doubting a would let her pull away to take it off, she reins herself to her fate. Pulling at the neck, she tears the fabric, pulling it open and shoving it down her body, the hardening as her bra-clad S come into view. Despite buying the largest bras she could find, they never seemed to cover or contain them much. And as such, most of them were visible and jiggling with every minuscule movement. Ooh, not bad. You put Samui to shame. Although why you bother with a bra on tits that big is beyond me. Remove it. And use your tongue. I won't do all the work. Removing the garment, she would have sighed in relief were it not for the hard slowly pushing into her mouth. Placing one hand on his thigh and wrapping the other around his length, as much as she can, she does her best to relax, knowing that being tense will only make it harder as she sinks forward. She stops almost immediately as she reaches her limit. Only moving at most a 2 inches down high length, and her mouth feels fit to burst, more full than she had ever felt. I didn't care. Using the leverage he has on her head, he pulls her forward. She screams around his length as he pushes into her throat, the vibrations only managing to encourage him as he continued, forcing her to take more and more of his length down her gullet. For several minutes this continues. Hinata struggling to pull away and breath while A forces her to take more and more of his mammoth. Her entire throat feels sore and raw in ways she hadn't known possible as it's violated. Thankfully, after an eternity, her lips finally meet the base as she his pelvis. She was sure she could feel him in her stomach as he simply rested there, relishing in the feeling of her throat as he kept her there. Maybe it was the lack of air. Or maybe it was simply morbid curiosity that motivated her. She removed her hands from his thighs. There was no point in trying to get away anyway, to her throat. Reaching up, she feels the massive rod protruding from her neck. It must have looked obscene, more than neck visible as it protruded through her skin. Tears well in her eyes as she starts to fear passing out from the lack of air. Just as her eyes start to drop, she is ripped off of the in a single fast motion as he pulled on her hair. However, was not done with her. Still gripping her hair, her drags her gasping form behind him as he goes to the bedroom. Throwing her onto the bed, her head hanging over the side as his starts pushing back into her mouth. Not content to simply be in her throat, he starts pulling back, before thrusting in her face into the bed as he paws at her massive tits. She can feel the her face as it stretches her throat, idly wondering if the damage would be permanent. Her head hanging, she could do little more than accept the abuse. Every thrust making his balls smack against her face as drool and spittle made a mess of her face. She winced and groaned as her grabbed her for leverage, the painful grip causing her massive mounds to redden even as his hands sunk in. Her too large even for a man of his size to fully grip. Hoping to help him along, she reaches up and grabs her throat and tightens her grip as much as she dares. Hoping to apply pressure and tighten her throat as she grasps the massive bulge in her neck. And going by the uneven and jerky movements of the next few thrusts she succeeded. She can feel the hot twitching inside her. She thrashing from her position knowing what that signaled. Kurenai had told her that much, desperate to get away from the rearranging her inside before a peaked. Legs and hips kicking and thrashing as her hands beat on his arms, trying to get him to release his grip. Anything to get him away from her before he finished. She had no such luck. A hilted himself inside her gullet as the massive rod exploded. Cum being poured almost directly into her stomach, forcing her to swallow the hot fluid. She couldn't even take solace in the fact that she couldn't taste it, since she couldn't keep up with the flood that came, and despite what she thought, it wasn't deposited directly into her stomach. Spurt after spurt after spurt as he continued to cum, the tide never seeming to stop as she swallowed desperately to keep up. Her attempt was in vain, as the cum backed up, billowing in her already full mouth and dripping out the side in her nostrils, adding to the mess already covering her features. She couldn't even cough as she was still being choked on the massive bulging in her throat, the cum only adding to her troubles as she started to fear for her life, as the was pulled out along with a tide of her own saliva that covered her face. She mules as the hands stop their massaging and return to her hair, pulling her onto the floor with a thud as it takes a seat on the bed, idly stroking himself as he looks on her prone form. Apparently trying to calm down, he waited patiently as he masturbated above her, and to her. Somehow that fact made her feel worse than the fact that she had just been taking his down her throat. Knowing that a man was using her semi-for as a masturbatory aid only inches away from her. Either way, she had a duty and her orders. Getting to her knees, she places her hands on her thighs and submissively bows her head as she waits to be told what to do. The large only inches from her face as she knelt between A's spread legs. She can feel the heat radiating off the massive, like having the sun shine on her face. Wrap those ing tits around my. It's about time you did some work. Shame filled her, knowing that her S had been the cause for many of the lust-filled comments and fantasies of many men. 2 giant globes that sat on her chest, each easily over twice the size of her head, that she despised and loathed for drawing so much attention to her. And now she was going to use them to please a despicable man who had forced his down her throat and used her as a personal cum dump. And by the sounds of it, she would be the one doing all work. It was a new form of humiliation, forcing her to not only participate in her own abuse but to actively use her own body to please this horrible man. To take her S and wrap them around that massive, hot, veiny, thick, tamer of A. No. Shaking her head, she grabs her elbows with the opposite hand, hugging herself as she pressed her S together and up. Her forearms disappearing as they are smothered by the pliant flesh. Lifting up the massive mounds, she scoots forward until they are directly above the gigantic stick that was responsible for violating her. Letting gravity do the work, she loosens her grip slightly, letting her S fall and hoping that the pillar of manhood would be between them and force the mammaries apart as it took it, rightful place. Just place, nothing rightful about this abuse. She was not so lucky, wincing as the rod stabs at the underside of a sensitive S, pre-cum smearing on her skin. Lifting the heavy bags, she tries again, and fails as she is once again stabbed in the tit. She tries again, and again, and again, and again, and again. For S' sake. Useless whore. Hold still. Grabbing her shoulders, a half stands as she leans back, breathing becoming difficult as the weight of her now pushed out S fell directly onto her chest. Lining up his with the underside of her S, he thrusts harshly, sinking between her flesh as a large head pops out, poking her in the cheek. Hinata was in awe, amazed that even her S weren't large enough to cover the massive pillar that was currently burning into the inside of her S. A falls back onto the bed, dragging her with him as she collapses, the weight of her S dragging her forward. Wanting to get this over with, she wastes no time, lifting the mounds before letting them fall, hoping that the feeling was pleasurable and that the space was tight enough to help him along. Continuing to use her S to jerk of the rakeage, all the while that massive head was pointing right at her. An ever-present threat as far as she was concerned. A weapon at her throat, And hopefully not in it. Use your mouth too. Stupid sow. Not even good enough for whoring. Useless girl. She quickly wraps her lips around the bulbous head, sucking on it like a candy. Willing to do whatever it took to end this humiliation. The cold air getting to her as a chill runs down her spine, causing her to shiver as she pleased. It must have been the air. It didn't matter that she had a piping hot pillar of humanity in between her tits. It also didn't matter that every single shiver seemed to coincide with A's words. Or that her nipples were hard and her panties were undoubtedly ruined. She was simply feeling the effects of the weather. That was all. As a child, you likely wouldn't have survived. You are much more useful now, like this. As a fat-titted whore sucking my. Get used to it, you'll be doing that a lot. She was shocked out of her thoughts at his words. Willfully ignoring the shiver that accompanies them, in a rush to end this she hums around the head in her mouth, the vibrations reverberating throughout the she was pleasuring, and ignores the strain on her arms, speeding up her movements and hoping the added friction will be enough. She can feel the thing twitching as it starts thrusting up, effectively ing her tits now, rather than simply having them used like a masturbatory aid by her. Cum floods her mouth, her cheeks bulging obscenely as her hole is flooded by the hot, sticky, and disgusting fluid. She tries to pull away, pulling off of the and pulling back. She is about to let go of her as her shoulders are grabbed by the stronger and larger man, holding her in place just as the next spurt comes. The head, now aimed at her face and barely an inch away, twitches as cum explodes onto her face. And all she can see is white. Pleasure floods her system, unlike any she had ever felt before. Her entire body jerks against her will as she is painted white, barely having the presence of mind to keep her grip. She leans back slack-jawed as yet more cum covers her features, flowing into and out of her mouth and drowning her in the torrent as she swims in bliss, riding on cloud nine while her body is used as a cum rag. The first thing she feels when she rejoins her body is an uncomfortable wetness in her pants. She was not unaccustomed to wet panties, and has even had to replace a few pairs in the past. But this was nothing like that. From knee to waist, to her pants were soaked. Not a smooth fluid wetness that comes with water or even urine, but a sticky and altogether more intimate wetness that caused the fabric to stick to her skin in not at all pleasant ways. And Hinata knew why. Even in her absent-minded bliss she knew. She had just cum. And cum hard. Hard enough that her own juices were pushed out of her and flooded her pants, unable to be contained in her. Her pleasure had shot out violently and soaked her clothes. She hadn't even known that was something women could do, have their cum shoot out like a man's. But the evidence was all too present. And it had been that had caused it. Treating her like a sack of meat as he choked her on his. Who had forced her to degrade herself like those harlots in the red light district in town. Who had marked her with his cum as he painted her face as white as her unnatural eyes. He might as well have branded her with how successfully he had laid claim to her body. This despicable man who saw her as nothing but a to use and discard. She hated herself for this. But she would do anything to have him make her feel like that again. Ripping fabric and cool air on her hot flesh return her to the present. She looks down, seeing a between her legs with his pointed directly at shimmering lips. She knew what he wanted, but that just couldn't be done. It was like trying to shove an orange through a keyhole. It was too large, too unyielding. Please, please, not there. It's too big. You can take my mouth again. Or my ah. A strong hand came down on a thick inner thigh, the wetness making the pain a dozen times worse. The sensitive flesh reddening immediately as the pain lessens to a dull ache. You don't make decisions, Sal. I'm going to take your. Now, what should you be doing? She whimpers, more of her wetness leaks out at the harsh words, and spreads her legs as far as she can. Closing her eyes, she lies back and waits for the inevitable penetration, praying that it doesn't break her. She jumps when hands come to rest on her thighs, strong fingers sinking into the plush flesh, making sure she wasn't going anywhere. She feels as the massive head parts her outer folds, the heat radiating off of the large bulbous head a warning of what was to come. But it doesn't. He sits there, his head pressed up against her entrance, not moving. In fact, the only thing he does is move a hand from a plush thigh to her large S, tweaking the nipple in his large fingers as he draws whines of frustration from her. The pawing of her massive teat and the large head threatening to spear her as it rests on her oversensitive flesh is too much. She needs something. She needs him to do something. Just end this tortuous limbo of unending arousal. Please. It's spoken so softly that almost she doesn't hear it. Spoken from her lips before she is aware she has done so. The fingers on her nipple twist it painfully, before pulling it up, seeming to try and tear it off. Please, what whore? Please. Me. The hand on her thigh leaves for a second before returning with a resounding smack. Blows falling onto the thick flesh of her sensitive inner thighs. 2, 3, 4. A dozen times he abuses the soft skin before harshly grabbing it. Not good enough. Like you mean it. So that was his game. He wanted her to ask. For her to beg him to take that big meaty and use it rearrange her insides as he treated her like the lowest of whores on the streets. To pray to him like a good of manhood, and as she degrades herself for this vile man who would violate her until done and discard her. She already wanted it, and he knew it. But voicing those desires was the final step. She would need to give voice and make her desires tangible. That she was nothing more than a lowly bitch put in her place by a big and dominating hand, and that she loved every moment of it. Doing so felt wrong, as if doing so would make it true, forever. But he wouldn't her until she did. So would she willingly become a discard her life and status as a kunyuchi to be a street walking, selling her cunt for pennies. Also that she can have the bitch breaker of a permanently rearrange her. You're goddamned right she would. Please. This lowly cunt with your massive. Make me your whore. Make it so that nothing will be able to please me. Ruin me. Her prayers are answered, but not with words. With a single thrust buries half of his monstrous length inside the curvy girl. Her eyes snapping open at the overwhelming pleasure and sense of fullness. Her hymen was broken years ago from training, but that didn't mean there was no pain. Muscles she had never used before were now being forced to stretch far further than they should by an unyielding. But the pain didn't hinder her pleasure. No, she found that she loved the painful stretch in her cunt as much as the pleasure, if not more. A twitching mess of a girl stares up at the ceiling as it works the rest of his length inside her. A sight she hadn't expected greets her. A big-titted whore looks back at her, whose face was covered in cum as more leaks out of her mouth still. Her dark blue hair was stained with streaks of white as well as her S. A look of pure unadulterated lust on her face, even as an outline of a peers through her stomach. Was that really her? She didn't recognize herself, seeing only an orgasming getting off from being treated like a sack of meat. She finds her voice as a bottoms out. The entirety of his mammoth now buried in her, providing a series of sensations that was as pleasurable as it was painful. Her wall flutter around the splitting her open, forcing her body to give to his unyielding strength and lust. And then he starts thrusting. And he had no sympathy for her poor abused body. Lightning engulfing his body as he pulls mostly out before hammering back into her depths. His protruding through her stomach as he her brains out. Her orgasmic screams are unending, as the absolutely ruins her. The lightning adding a sharp edge as it electrocutes her sensitive flesh, causing her to twitch and jerk in what must be comical ways. She had no control of her own body. The vigorous thrusting into her causing her to jump, smacking her in the face over and over and over, smearing the cum that had yet to harden. She might as well had been a human-sized doll, nothing but a pair of tits and holes for it to shove his bulging into. This is what she had been reduced to. And she had never been happier. Her orgasm takes her by surprise. Her screams intensifying as her walls clamp down on the magnificent invader, refusing to let go of the object making her feel so good. She is vaguely aware of a cursing as he slows down, but refuses to stop, as he should. His big titted should never dictate what he does. She is not sure how long her orgasm lasts, or even if it was only one. But she feels her legs pulled up as she is bent in half. Her feet less than an inch from her ears as she is forced to look at the strained face of as he pounds into her. This position allowing him to reach even deeper within her, as a small orgasm tears through her. And then she feels it. The jerky movements, the twitches along the length, she can feel it in the hands she has over the protruding bulge in her stomach. He is about to come. He is going to come in her. Please. Please. Not. Not inside. Please. No. She pushes at the broad shoulders, trying to get him off of her. To get him out of her before he comes. He won't allow that. Her eyes roll back into her head as she is filled. The piping hot cum pouring into her in thick spurts, soothing the ache in her battered walls. If she had the presence of mind, she could have looked down and seen every single spasm and jerk of that had broken her. A puddle forms under her as cum leaks out her, struggling to get past the large rod plugging her up. A combination of their fluids, as her own squirted out and covered A's abs as she convulsed beneath him. But he wasn't done. He pulls out, allowing a flood of their combined juices to pour out of her. Hinata is manhandled, flipped onto her stomach. She is put into the puddle face first, reapplying her cum makeup. Takes his still hard. How is he still hard? How? And places it on her winking rear hole. Not letting her regain consciousness enough to object, he thrust in, their combined cum acting as lube as he buries his head past the tight ring of muscle. Luckily he doesn't push further than that. But as Hinata was about to learn, that was only because he had much worse planned for her. Reaching under her legs, he wraps his arms around them before bringing his hands together behind her head. And then he is standing up, and bringing her with him. Her screams return as she is picked up, now in the air and helpless as she is brought down while it thrusts up. Forcing more and more of the hard, hot, and big up her. She had never been in so much pain. It was like someone was sticking a hot iron that had been in a fire up her. She writhed and struggled, but she could do nothing. She was stuck in the air, trapped by a larger and stronger man who wanted her to take it up the and she was. She gives up, hanging limply as she cries and is given her first anal experience. Inch by inch, he forced his into her rear hole, groaning and whispering insults into her ear as he sodomizes her. And then she reaches the base. Her plush cheeks make contact with his hips as she is used as his personal sleeve. Open your eyes, cunt. She hadn't realized they were closed. Looking forward, she finds herself in front of another mirror. Being held in the air, legs wide open and by her head, giving her an unobstructed view of her swollen and leaking. But also the weapon sheathed in her colon. Her plush thighs were beaten a bright red, as were her s, and what she could see of her face a mess of cum, tears, and spittle with glazed over eyes, drool falling from her gaping mouth onto her fat tits. All the while that damn could still be seen sticking through her gut. Even buried in my eye can't escape its gaze. She really was a whore. She deserved this. P. Poo. Poo. L. Plural. She can't even speak. The wasn't moving, but it knocked the air out of her just by being there. She wasn't even sure what she was going to ask for. For him to her like the whore she is. Or for him to pull out before he breaks her for good. But she might as well have been broken already. She would never be the same. Not after this. She couldn't be. But like all things today, she didn't have a say in the matter. She is pulled up before being forced down with more strength than she has ever had. The sounds of her Surekiks meeting A's hips as she is forced down on his over and over. The burning in her asshole worsening as she ed. It was the worst thing she had ever experienced. And gods damn her, she loved it. She looks at her reflection. Seeing a mess of cum and spit being ed up the by her betters. A whore-loving being treated like property as she was too broken and worn out to even cry out. She is not sure how long it went on. How long her intestines spent being rearranged before the telltale signs of an oncoming orgasm were felt in her. With one final thrust she is brought down as a hilts himself in her, flooding her colon with a tide of his potent seed. And that was the final straw. She flows him over the edge, as her juices squirt out of her, spraying all over the mirror, distorting her reflection as she is made into a whore. After all, that's what she is now. She couldn't go back to being a kunoichi now. Her body and mind were too broken, too damaged. And this brutal treatment felt too good. In her last moment before blacking out, she looks at herself and the cum leaking out of her from the bulging though her skin. Who was good for nothing than being used. And she couldn't be happier. It had been 2 weeks since I had made the deal with Tsunade to steal Hinata from Naruto, and he could honestly say that he was well on his way to accomplishing that. It was a bit of a rocky start, as initially Naruto was hesitant to let the muscular rakage stay in his home. However, with Hinata saying that he was going to help her with her training, Naruto eventually agreed. The children, however, were a different story altogether though. Their daughter Himawari was ecstatic when she found out the rakage was staying with them. Boruto on the other hand looked angry at the fact, but I just brushed it off like it didn't matter to him. Boruto actually tried to tell the rakage to leave but was reprimanded by Hinata for being rude to their guest. With the situation explained. After that they showed Ai to the room he would be staying in. He wasn't all that impressed with it though. It seemed to be on the smaller side, at least to Ai, who is considered to be a mountain of a man. The only redeeming part of the room in his eyes was the large queen-sized bed that was sitting underneath a window. If he looked out the window, Ai would get a good view of the street, and if he looked further, he would see the Hokage monument. If I was being optimistic, then the other good thing about the room was that it was right next to Naruto and Hinata's room. Over the course of those 2 weeks I helped Hinata in the mornings with her training. I told her when they were first starting that her usual clothing won't do for working out and would have to wear something else. I sung himself praises for this, as on the first day of training I was there early to start his own regiment when Hinata walked in. She was wearing a black sleeveless tank top that pushed her massive S up, giving a very enticing cleavage. For the lower half of her body she was wearing black sweatpants that were fairly baggy. On her feet were a pair of standard shinobi sandals. She also had her hair put into a ponytail so that it wouldn't get in the way during the workout. That was the standard outfit that she wore for every session they had. Those 2 weeks were used to condition Hinata's body to the strain of kunoichi lifestyle. After the training I would help her pick up around the house. I didn't really want to do it, but he figured that if he could get closer to Hinata, the chances of his plan coming to fruition would be better. This proved to be fruitful, since they would make small talk, giving Ai an insight to things that she enjoyed, such as her favorite food, color, and things of that nature. In the afternoons he would ask her to show him around the village so he could see the most popular spots in the village. This served 2 purposes, the first being that it allowed him to get more time by himself with Hinata. The second was less for his goal and more to ogle her. Since Hinata was his guide, she would be out in front leading him around while he walked behind her. This gave him the perfect chance to steal glances and looks at her as she walked. I thought back to a week ago when he made the first big move on his conquest to claim Hinata. I made sure that him and Hinata were the only ones home at the time. He did a quick walk around the house to make sure before he went to the upstairs bathroom and turned on the shower. Ai's plan was a simple one. He would take a shower and forget a towel before calling for Hinata and asking if she could bring him one. When she showed up with the towel, he would step out of the shower to grab it and give Hinata a full view of his. That was the entirety of his plan, and he was proud to say it went off without a hitch. In fact, it went better than he expected, as Hinata stared at his body for a few seconds before making a loud squeak and running from the room. Ai cut himself off from his thoughts to prepare for the next step of his plan. He left the guest bedroom and headed downstairs to search for Hinata. He didn't have to search long, as she was sitting in the living room reading a book. Hinata looked his way and instantly turned her head away with a blush on her face. She had been like that since the day she caught him, and I had to say he enjoyed it, as it proved she couldn't get him out of her head. Brushing those thoughts aside, I spoke. Hinata, I would like to thank you for all the help you have been since I've been here, and also to apologize about the incident last week. I tried his best to sound innocent as he could, but it wasn't a tone he used often, so he wasn't sure if it worked or not. Hinata looked his way after she heard him say that, but the blush was still on her face. You don't need to thank me for anything, Lord Rakage. I should be thanking you for helping me get back in shape. I noticed that she just so happened to forget to mention the shower incident. She was about to continue speaking, but I interrupted her. Please at least let me make up for that shower incident last week. Allow me to take you on an apology dinner. It would mean a lot to me. I's tone suggested that he was ashamed and genuinely want to make up for that mistake. This couldn't be further from the truth, but Hinata didn't know that. Hinata didn't reply immediately as she was caught off guard. She was skeptical, but from what she heard the dark-skinned Rakage say, she would feel bad declining him. She took a deep breath before saying, "Okay, Lord Rakage, I will accept." When should we go? Hinata questioned the Rakage. I was thinking around 8. Is that alright with you, Hinata? I knew he was taking advantage of Hinata's trusting nature, and that is exactly what he wanted. He watched Hinata think it over for a moment before nodding. I just gave her a smile before saying, "Very good, then be ready at 8, then we will leave." With that, I left to head up the stairs. He decided that he would take her to a simple bar so that he didn't need to wear anything special. He didn't tell Hinata where he was taking her, so he wasn't sure what she would wear, only hoping that it was why. 2 hours later, 8 rolled around and I was waiting downstairs for Hinata to show up. Naruto had taken a mission earlier in the day, so he wouldn't be back until later. Boruto went to visit Sarada and Hinata made him take Himawari with him. That left I and Hinata to leave without anyone stopping them. I was cut from his musings when he heard a clacking sound on the stairs. He had expected Hinata to wear something but was disappointed that she was only wearing her usual jacket and shorts. I didn't let that be shown though, since that would make her think he is up to something. As she made it to the bottom of the stairs, I spoke to Hinata. "You look lovely, Hinata." He even gave her a smile to try to get her to lower her guard even more. It made Hinata blush slightly, but only for a little bit, as she was getting used to I complimenting her as he did at every chance he got. It was a bit boost to her self-confidence to hear that someone thought she was pretty. "Thank you, Lord Rakage, you look very handsome." She said this in response to what he said to her, as it was polite tea.